Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Africam Show, brought to you by explore.org. My name is Russell Gerber. Lovely to have you with us here for the next half an hour. I'll be here for all of you, have a chat about what we've got on the cameras, what might be around, who might be coming down for a visit, or if you just have any questions about the bush. And even if you just want to say a quick hello, we always love to hear from you. So thank you for joining us once again. And we've kicked off the show at the beautiful Camphors Dam, I believe, looking down at a lovely little family of white-faced whistling ducks. Not too many prizes for those of you who can guess why they're called whistling ducks. Or white-faced whistling ducks, for that matter. But let's be honest, there are many birds out there that have very strange names. This one, fairly well, pretty much a descriptive name indeed. And you can see this little family happily grooming each other. One of the more common duck species that we see down here in southern Africa. They have cousins known as the fulvous whistling duck as well. We see around these parts from time to time. Not so much around Camphors Dam, but as you head up towards Kruger National Park, areas where we have many of our cameras, and then all the way up into Botswana, northern Botswana that is, very much along the Zambezi River. We see quite a few of those fulvous whistling ducks, and the white-faced is a little bit more widespread, actually occurring all the way through the Cape here in South Africa, and pretty much just avoiding the driest parts of the southern parts of the African continent. Let's have a few hellos out there. Who's out there? Jan is here. Welcome, Jan. That's Aussie Jan, of course. And dealing with some more flooding down there, Jan. I hope everyone's okay. But thanks for joining us. Stay above water. Who else is out there? Cindy Drake, hello. Stephanie from Virginia, once again. Thank you for joining us, Stephanie. How's it going? Ricardo Juvino says beautiful animals. Agreed, Ricardo. Thanks for joining us on the show. Here we see some beautiful shots looking down at the water's edge of an Egyptian goose. And what looks like a blacksmith lapwing tormenting a little plover. And then we've also got a water thickney who's just arrived on the scene there. Who else is saying hello? Anna Emerson, hello from Boston. Hope everybody is warm in Boston. I imagine not too warm this time of year. And then we got a question from Lena Schmidt. Where in Africa is this, Lena? We are in South Africa. There are a number of cameras around the northern parts of the country. Oh, there's a little crocodile who's just popped up on the water's edge there.
Good afternoon and welcome to Wild Moments, brought to you by explore.org. During the course of this next half an hour, we are going to look at the highlights from the Africam live cameras situated around Southern Africa. This afternoon, joining us, we have got Jamie Patterson, no less, one-time legal student at Cambridge University, one-time safari guide, and now veterinary student. Hello, Jamie.
Hi, James. Always a pleasure. Hello, everybody. I like to keep things interesting, is how
Yes.
I prefer to think about it.
Yes. Yeah, you like to keep things interesting and financially strained. That is fair enough. Why not? For those of you joining us for the first time, welcome. For those of you joining us for the second time, welcome. Please do send through any questions that you might have on whatever platform you happen to be watching us on. We'll do our best to get to those questions. Jamie, well, I think we'll probably get straight to it rather than discuss your studies. Let's go. We're going to go to our first clip now, and we're just going to talk over it as it goes along, and then we'll discuss it, and you can ask us any questions that you might have. I am going to ask
Marvelous.
the director, who also happens to be my wife, to play the first clip. There it is. Here we have got the back end of some elephants, which is quite fun, I suppose. And, well, what we're looking at here is a very thirsty group of elephants that are enjoying the water. A little one being very cute indeed. That is too sweet. Just to be clear, that the light shining on these animals is not in fact a light, it's infrared, so I suppose it is a light, but it's not something that they can see. I think this is quite interesting because, yet again, the kind of, I mean, one hesitates to use the term cretinous, but odd behavior is being perpetrated by what is definitely a male mammal.
You ever watched a toddler with a spoon trying to feed itself?
Yes.
Because that's kind of what it's reminding me of.
It's very similar. I don't know if you have the same experience, but I always find that with human beings, as well as, of course, I mean, look at this idiot. With human beings as well as other male mammals, it seems to be the males that behave in this fashion. The females seem to learn faster. They don't seem to behave in these outlandishly ridiculous ways, unless it's intentional. Whereas this guy is just being, to me, a typical male mammal. His mother's having to say, "Get up, come on, stop behaving like a goon." Is that your experience as well, or do you find that it's pretty
of my godson.
Yeah. Yeah. I know I've got two nephews, and they are just like this male elephant. I have a friend with two daughters who don't behave anything like this little elephant. And as you say, I mean, biologically, this elephant is still learning to use his trunk. He should be just about there by now, I would have thought. But he's learning to use his trunk. He's trying to find his way in the world and basically learning how to be a male elephant, I guess.
Do you ever wonder when they're that age? I mean, when perhaps it was just me as a small child, but when I was little, there was an almost sort of constant narrative in my game that was going on, whatever I happened to be interested in at the time. Do you ever wonder what goes on in that little brain, not so little brain in the case of a baby elephant, exactly what it is he's thinking about, or if he's just
I absolutely do, yeah. And I think with an elephant like that, they do have such massive brains, and we know so little about what's actually going through them. They're the one mammal, I think it's the only mammal, if I'm not mistaken, that has a greater number of neurons in the brain than we do, although they're unable to do calculus as far as I'm aware.
As far as we're aware. They've also, I've just read a study recently about the number of nerves in their trunk. And I mean, we tend to think of our hands as extremely complex things. It takes us a long time to master the chord. And the scientists have just discovered, I think the elephant's trunk is probably the most sensitive animal body part that we know of so far. There's something
Viewers.
like 400,000 neurons in each, what are they called? Oh, it's just gone totally out of my head. Anyway, it equates to 800,000 in
Bundle.
total. Ganglion, nerve ganglion. That's the
Okay.
word I was looking for.
Wow. All right. Okay. So extremely innervated, in case you missed that. That's a good word to use when you're next at a dinner party. You can say, well, I just learned that an elephant's trunk is very, and then pause for effect, innervated. And everyone will be very impressed with you. Hello, Aunt Christine and Valentina. You say it would be great to have a veterinarian show with Jamie. Well, yes, I suppose it would. Whether her fellow students or professors would approve of her coming into a dissection hall armed with a live broadcast system I'm not sure. Maybe they would. They've all done Zoom over the last little while. Perhaps they wouldn't have a problem with it. And Jan Pars, you say, yay, James and Jamie together. Well, yes, in the virtual space. Jamie, I think you're in Pretoria, aren't you?
Not yet. I'm still in Johannesburg. I haven't managed to get back to Pretoria yet. I'm doing my journey in gradual stages.
Right. Okay. Pretoria, by the way, is where the veterinary college is. Okay. I think let's move on to the next clip. That was very entertaining. I don't think it was particularly biologically significant. So let's move on to the next clip and see what we can see there.
And yeah, just having a look at this fellow. I'm going to leave your best guesses out there. Perhaps a juvenile blacksmith, but I reckon Senegal not too far off. Like I said, let me know your thoughts. Not always easy to tell on the cameras. That's why it's always nice to have a good pair of binoculars to check them out properly. He's running back again to protect his little territory, though. From our little banded plover, it seems. But very peaceful down by the water's edge. Not much on the go here. I can tell you, folks, a lot of times when you hang out by the water in Africa, when things look really peaceful, oftentimes if there's some of you out there who enjoy your fishing, obviously going fishing in Africa is quite sought after by a number of visitors. Well, you never know what you're going to get on the edge of your, on the end of your rod. As we've crossed back over to Katmai. Another one of our favorite cameras, especially with our low angle shot here. You know that we have no visitors there at the moment. It's always nice to have the bush sounds. Birds calling in the background. And as I mentioned earlier, we've been having some issues with our audio. Heavy storms in the area, as well as some, of course, critters playing with the cameras. And I know we've been having some technical issues today on the show, so apologies for that. Our technicians are working on it frantically, I assure you. But thank you for your patience. Not always easy to pull it all together with these wild locations, satellite dishes. Luckily, that's not my department, otherwise you'd have nothing to watch. We've got Tau back up and running now. Of course, one of our busiest cameras over the last few weeks, last few months, I would say, in terms of the sheer diversity of animals. We've got a grey heron here in the foreground, Springbok, the more white and light brown colored antelope you see there. The more reddish colored one is impala. And then we also had a waterbuck laying down and relaxing. And it looks like we've just crossed back over to Camphor's Dam, who have we got hanging out in the water there? A couple of Egyptian goose, of course, the usual suspects at a lot of our water holes. I would say these days probably the most common large water bird we find in the country. And we've got a couple of red-knobbed coots, I think. Those little blackbirds with the whitish bill. I'm trying to see who else we've got there. Perhaps a Cape shoveler as well. We've had a few of them hanging about at Camphor's Dam. I don't know how many of you out there are into your birds. It's always a fun aspect of the bush to get into, because you never know what's going to come down. And that, of course, clearly evident today on the live cameras. If we don't have any of the big fancies, like, big mammals, elephants, buffalo, of course, the big cats. Well, there are a lot of other things for you to look at, and this is a remarkable part of the world in southern Africa to tick off bird species, and particularly water birds, of course. But yeah, we've had quite a few great sightings from the Egyptian goose, like I said, which is very common. But recently we've been seeing yellow-billed duck here, so keep an eye out for them. Every now and again, African black duck, Cape shoveler has been hanging about as well. And we've had a few red-billed teal around at Camphor's as well. But we just crossed back over to Tau now. Looking on at our very relaxed looking antelope species. Which does suggest that it's unlikely we have any predators lurking around. Although, if they always knew where the predators were, well, nobody would ever be on the menu, would they? So, for the time being though, everyone looking pretty chilled, but it's live. You never know who might come sneaking out of the bush at any time. We've seen some lovely lion sightings here in the recent past. But for now, all looks very quiet. And just a little bachelor herd of impalas. You can see they're a little bit bigger than the Springbok as well. For those of you who don't know, of course, the Springbok is the national animal of South Africa. Oh, the pride of the country. The Springbok national rugby team, of course, is named after that animal. which you wouldn't consider to strike fear into the opponent, but they are really beautiful, amazingly graceful, and of course renowned for that very strange pronking behavior, where they get the name spring from, where they spring around on all fours, the tuft of hair, white tuft of hair up their back that stands up on end. And interestingly, no one really knows why they do it. There's no particular reason for it, other than potentially for a bit of fun. And of course, potentially as a display. But you see it done by males and females, youngsters, even fully grown adults. So it really, there's no clear reasoning behind that behavior. Very similar looking to the Thompson's gazelle that we find in East Africa. And many of you, when you think of gazelle, that's what you would think of, and the Springbok looks very similar to that. You can see this individual on the right-hand side has had a little shake of the fur, and you can see that little white tuft of fur down the posterior part of the spine, close to the tail. Doesn't look like the Springbok are going to oblige us with some pronking today, though, unfortunately. But you never know, could happen. And a lovely bull waterbuck in the background. But again, as you can see, just struggling with our pictures today. Hopefully we can sort that out soon. Who else we got out there? A couple of hellos. Jackie Burton, Scarlett from Nebraska. Welcome, Jackie. And who else? Pounce asks, why do the crocs not go after the Egyptian geese? I would think they would make a tasty treat. Pounce, they do, actually. The smaller ones don't tend to be quite as brave, but from time to time you'll see the bigger crocs actually taking birds straight off the surface of the water even. In some parts, major rivers where you have storks and other water birds nesting, when they often do so, of course, in great numbers. And at those nesting sites, you'll often see crocodiles hanging out below the trees, waiting for the potential of chicks to fall from the trees into the water, at which time the crocs quickly go and grab them up. But the reason that you don't see it often is that it's a pretty low success rate for a crocodile to attempt grabbing one of them, especially an adult. So when you do see them eating birds, it tends to be in those kinds of vulnerable environments underneath their nesting sites, particularly in nesting colonies, as I mentioned. So I hope that answers your question. And thankfully for crocodiles, they don't have to eat too much or too often. They can often go weeks, sometimes months, if they have a decent meal without eating, depending on their environment and how big they are, of course. But they do very well, mostly eating fish. And I hope that answers your question. Just through to say that that's the hybrid blacksmith lapwing, crowned lapwing. And says that there are a few offspring along the Sabi River. Well, thank you, Christy, for that. I have to say that that's very interesting for me as well. I was really struggling to ID that little lapwing around there. Very strange coloration, didn't quite match the blacks, not the blacks, with the Senegal lapwing we were, or that I actually thought it was. But thank you for that. That's very interesting indeed. I didn't realize it was a hybrid between them. And now keeping him. And let's go back to Skukuza and have a look at that. Like I said, very interesting to me. Not something I would see or have seen very often. Of course, you do get occasionally hybrid species. The strongest hybrid I ever saw was a hybrid in Botswana, which was actually between a waterbuck and a red lechwe. I didn't really have a name, but I suppose you could mix it up somewhere. And that was a very strange mammalian hybrid. But thank you for that, Christy. That's very interesting. I'll keep an eye out for our little cross hybrid lapwing in the future. I do love our new camera, and I know that we don't have sound there, but this whole area is one of the most famous wildlife areas in Africa. It's just Africa. Zooming in on our little island again, and there you can see that fellow standing on the island is that hybrid that Christy was talking about. Like I said, thank you, Christy. You learn something new every day. Any safari guide who's worth his salt always takes advice from people who know more than they do. And there are many, I have to admit. But yeah, really interesting to see. And now that you look at it, you can see kind of the mix between the two species in terms of the coloration. And a fine example of the incredible work that the zoomies do and the amazing zoom we have on our camera. You can see here's in the center of your screen now, right up at the top. Here's another hybrid we see sometime on the cameras at Camphor's Dam as well. There's a almost golden looking wildebeest, which is actually, it was bred by some local farmers over the centuries, or the last few decades, I would say. And you might see them. Occasionally you see black impala as well, specifically bred for to emphasize that black or dark gene. But as I say, those are bred. This is a naturally occurring hybrid. Not something you see every day. So much obliged, Christy. Good spotting. You are clearly interested in your birds and could teach us a thing or two, I have no doubt. Okay, back to Tembe if we can. If things are all right on that side. While we're looking about at Tembe, let's see who's out there. Carol Parker has joined us on the show. Says, so cool. Thank you for this and all the live shows you do. Hello from Ohio. Thank you, Carol. I believe it's very cold in Ohio at the moment. Chatted to some guests of mine who said there was pretty much a whiteout of snow in Ohio, which sounds very pretty to me. Keep warm, Carol. Thanks for watching the show as we look down at our couple of Cape turtle doves. And why don't we head on over to Camphor's Dam. And unfortunately, once again, we run out of time. And again, apologies for the technical issues today, folks. We'll be working on that in the coming few days, this week. Getting our teams out to all the cameras in these remote places. But yeah, pretty quiet on the cameras this afternoon. But thank you for all your questions and your interaction. Thanks for joining us. We will, of course, be back again next week, same time and same place. Until then, have a lovely week further. Keep an eye out on the cameras. You never know what might come on down to surprise us. But from all of us here in the Africam team, thanks for watching the show. And we'll see you next week. Ciao for now.